let's kick this thing into high gear. I'm excited about this panel. This is actually going to be one of my personal highlights from in the entire Ascend 2018 event, because I get to bring up three incredible experts and thought leaders in the space of filling a prospecting pipeline, aka marketing and lead generation. How many of you have as many prospects in the pipeline right now as you would ever want in your business? Raise your hands. Good answer. I can't raise my hand either, right? Marketing is always a work in progress. But today, we're going to help get you over that hump, hopefully, and propel you down the marketing field into a place where you can have consistent, predictable, measurable marketing results, prospects in the pipeline, appointments being set, and so forth. So without any further ado, I want to bring up my panelists who are going to do all the work today. And if we have any of that music from the declaration, we can play it. If not, no worries. I want to bring up give them rounds of applause. Marshall Carper from Carper Communications, Megan Chiarello from Gazzaro Creative and B2B Marketing Tour, and John Pagetta from the PT Services Group. And just so that everyone knows, we're going to pull these chairs to the front as much as we can without falling off the stage, especially since the cameras are rolling. All right, so our job for you all today is to do our best just to have a organic, casual conversation and discussion about strategy, tactics, concepts that can help you build, refine, maximize your prospecting, maximize your positioning in the marketplace, maximize your ability to set appointments and create opportunities with new business. So I have taken the luxury of leveraging technology and writing some talking points and notes down for our fine panelists. Before we jump into that, though, if each of you could maybe take 30 seconds and introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Marshall, and work down the line. Take 30 seconds, introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Marshall Carper, and I run a content marketing agency called Carper Communications. So basically what that means, it's a fancy way of saying that we find ways to add extensions to your sales process, to use content to make you more engaging with prospects, more engaging with clients, make your sales funnel more effective and efficient.
Excellent. Megan.
I'm Megan Chiarello, and I am a marketing leader in this industry. Formerly worked in the benefits technology space, and my passion is really campaign development, how to create content that resonates with your audience, and how to really analyze the behavior of your audience to really speak to the right people that you want to get in front of.
Awesome. I'll let you pass the mic down to John.
Thank you. I'm John Pagetta. I'm with the PT Services Group. We basically do what really nobody wants to do, which is pick up the phone, call, set the appointment. And it's really evolved over the last 5-6 years from just about a pipeline and quality to really ultimately your success rate in the field. So the ability to ensure that you close, turn the ROI that you need to make it successful. But we're there to help build that pipeline, get you in front of people, and get that time suck out of your way so you can focus on bigger, better things.
Awesome. So let's dive in. I'm going to try, and I hope it's okay with you guys, I'm going to try to open up the last 5 or 10 minutes for questions, because as much insight and strategy and tactics as these three can give you in the short few minutes that we have, I know that if one of you has a question, 20 or 30 of you have the same question. So it's going to serve you just as well, or maybe even more so, if we open it up to the group. Is that okay with you guys? Awesome. Where's that? Oh, there's the catch box. So I'm ready. I am not a quarterback. Where's Cobb? Where's Daniel? There he is. Daniel Cobb back there. So I may have you come up with the catch box and toss it to people who have questions. Yeah, no, don't do that. All right, let's jump in. So a few key concepts and talking points I do want to dive into that I think are really important is an overall philosophy of marketing. And this is going to start out, just full transparency, this may start out a little abstract, but it's important that we build this foundation so that the tactics and strategies make even more sense. First thing, direct response marketing, creating ROI with marketing, something that is predictable, measurable, and gets results. one of our philosophies at Bottom Line Solutions is any message you put out into the marketplace should always include some specific call to action where you're asking the prospect to take a specific step. So versus just calling on you, I will let whoever wants to volunteer sort of extrapolate on the concept of direct response, why it's important, how you've utilized it, how you've seen it utilized. Again, the idea is we don't want to build a brand for brand building's sake. We want to make sure that we're getting a legitimate opportunity.
I'll jump in because everyone else passed it to me. So the discussion of ROI is really important in marketing. It's really easy to do a ton of marketing spend and a ton of marketing activity, and then at the end of it say, did that help? I don't really know. So measurement's really important. But when you're thinking about ROI, though, especially in this space, you should be thinking about short and long-term ROI. Because you guys are it's B2B space, you're targeting business owners. It's not a short sales cycle. So that piece of content that you released in January might give you a big return in September. But if your tracking systems aren't in place to be able to track that development, that evolution of that relationship, you're going to miss out on what could be a big game-changing piece of your marketing that you should be investing more in.
Awesome. Megan?
Yes, I definitely agree. And I think a big piece of developing content for ROI is the acknowledgement that all content is not created equal. So you can create a resource or a guide, but it's not going to resonate to every aspect of your audience. And you should be really mindful when creating content that you're positioning it to both prospects and to your clients. Or you rework content and you have specific content that's for building new business, but then also being mindful of content that's really going to help you retain your clients. There's so much white noise in the space now. Your clients are getting bombarded with so many content resources and guides and download this and do that. And I just think it's really about positioning and getting it to the right people to really have an effective ROI.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the brief thought I would have in the space relative to what we do is two things, tone and compelling. Tone matters, meaning how you position yourselves, being true to who you are, and how you make that story compelling. Think about your own, as they were referencing, your own email inbox and how you treat things that come your way. Not just in terms of email, but other things. There are reasons certain things stand out to you, and the most of it is just clutter and noise. So I would try and make sure that the story is compelling. When we work with an advisor or a producer, we build a storyboard. So what is the story you tell, and why is that compelling? Why is that different and going to land differently on the person you're trying to get to than everybody else they hear from? And then tone matters, because when you engage with somebody, you want to make sure how you've positioned who you are in your services rings true. There's no sense or feel of bait and switch for that person.
Right. That's huge, and thank you all for those notes. Just catching on something that all of you said or alluded to, let's talk about creating this compelling, clear message, this story, John, that you talked about. So, I think we all agree that having a clear, compelling value proposition and story is critical. Being able to tell it authoritatively with the right tone, with the right writing is important. But let's take one step back from that. How do we go about finding or creating that compelling, clear message? What is it? What's that process look like? Is it something where we wake up in the middle of the night and we get struck by lightning, and if that never happens, we don't have one? Is there a scientific sort of approach or process that we can create or follow to come to a compelling, clear value proposition or story?
Do you want to start, John? So there's a lot of ways that you can go about finding your story, and I'm interested to hear what Megan and John have to say about this, because there's a lot of approaches. For us, a big part of it is very, very journalistic based. Interviewing your clients, interviewing the people in your business, having someone interview you, someone that can bring in an outside consultant, in other words, that can step away from where you are in the business. You're always nose to nose with everything you're doing, so it's hard to see the bigger picture themes that might run through your business that you don't even see. So when you're developing that story, you're trying to figure out what makes it compelling, don't be afraid to step back and try to identify the things that are kind of connecting all the pieces of your business that are really working.
Yeah, so the one thought, keep in mind, our behavior is more on the phone, so we're trying to get a message that resonates and is compelling in a 3, 5, 7 minute conversation to get you in the door the right way, so it's a little bit different. the one thing that we encourage everybody to do, and it's part of why you're here, have a coach. Every coach we talk to has a coach. One of the realities is the best groups we work with, just like being here with Nelson and Scott, is that ability to help, as Marshall was saying, get you forced through the trees kind of stuff, away from the nose to nose, day to day, and somebody that has a different insightful manner than maybe you have. The key reality for you is you have to be open to that critique, and you have to be open to change.
Good. Megan?
So I'm going to take it from the perspective of actual implementation.
Sure.
So when we talk about, building your story and then how you communicate that, what we found was really successful is starting with a big picture and looking at your sales cycle too. So if you know that you have certain goals or you need to close new business in October, you need to work through a cohesive strategy backwards and have a monthly marketing campaign and content strategy for unique and interesting content to hit your prospects and clients all year, so that you're not coming in June and saying, oh my God, we need to start marketing, or we need to start pushing out resources. So having that planning, but specifically having the planning with all your leaders in your organization. I know that you guys are probably running lean and mean, and you're doing everything. So what I found was always successful was sitting with the sales leader, the marketing leaders, and your client services and your operational team. I mean, that was when we would get the best insight into what clients needed, where the disconnect was, and then we can push that back out to our prospects, because if our clients are having the same challenges, so are the people that we're trying to get in front of, and you can get out with that messaging. So your story is there. The way you tell it uniquely is branding, but it's really how you craft your value proposition and your differentiators with that story, timely and relevant. And I think, that's a lot to kind of achieve. But if you think about that very mindfully and intentionally with your strategy, I think you'll see an ROI, and you'll see you're moving the needle a little bit with every month, with every new campaign that you try to execute.
One other quick thought is, don't be all things to all people. Having a more focused niche is incredibly valuable, and it comes out a lot in our behavior. But don't try and do things all things to all people, especially with your messaging, because then they really don't know what you do. You come across as that pure generalist, and they go on looking for what they're specifically tracking.
Excellent. So let me just point to, who here has a favorite flavor of ice cream? Like, this one flavor, and it just sticks out of your mind, is that's the flavor of ice cream. Raise your hand. Eric Silverman, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Whatever I like.
Is it National Ice Cream Day today?
Yeah, it may be National Ice Cream Day. Don't jump ahead. Chocolate peanut butter. All right. So he did not say, and I'm just stealing John just to do an illustration here. He said chocolate peanut butter. It sounds delicious, by the way. He didn't say vanilla. So just to steal the obvious metaphor, right? If you are vanilla, if you are too much of a generalist, if you're too bland, if your brand is too bland, then you're not going to be effective with anyone. So to some extent, your message should polarize. Not necessarily in a negative way. I'm not telling you to go offend people. But the reality is you need to know who you are, know what value you bring, and stick to that. If you're talking to a 60 Life group and it's clear that their philosophy and values don't jive with you being a next generation benefits firm, and you know that's your future, what should you do with that prospect? Get up and walk out. Absolutely. Because the most likely result of that, if you land the account, which you likely won't, you'll likely waste a bunch of time. So how many of you had this experience? You go, you have a meeting, the meeting goes okay, maybe even pretty good. 2 weeks go by, you're expecting to hear from them, you said, oh, we'll set a meeting, the meeting never happens. Finally, you get another meeting. It's the same conversation you had 2, 3, 4 weeks earlier because they don't remember what you talked about. And that goes on for 6 months. Anybody have that experience? All right, so one of the possibilities for that, there's lots of reasons that could happen, but one of the possibilities of that is you weren't specific and clear and compelling with your value proposition. You were trying to be too general. right? You're trying to be too nebulous with your value proposition. So I think what all of you have said is absolutely tremendous. And I want to tag on to something, John, you just mentioned, which was the specific idea of not being everything to everybody, because then you're effectively nothing to everybody, right? You can't be effective. So the most specific, articulate, compelling, clear messages are those that resonate and are most relevant, to use your word, Megan, with that specific audience. Let's talk about defining and identifying that particular audience. How do you guys go about, what are those criteria you look for in this particular space that are relevant to this audience? What are those selects, those criteria, those characteristics, those qualities? What are the questions you ask to identify that ideal client profile?
Yeah, I can take a stab first. This is my jam right here. So, when we look at, building a campaign and getting that criteria, you really look, you can go so many ways about it. You can go in terms of your buyer persona. So you've got employer type, industry, size. I mean, you all know your sweet spots. So if you're looking at who I want to message, and it's almost like you're projecting out what you want to bring into your firm. So I would start there, looking at, really identifying the attributes of your target audience. And then I would say, too, looking at your buying cycle as well. So where they are in your pipeline, and identifying those that had an appointment, those that you've been calling on that got a proposal, and start really looking deep into where they are in your sales cycle, so you can hit them with that right relevant messaging where they are in the stages of close.
Excellent. John?
So my commentary is probably a little different. It's more about when you're in front of somebody and how you choose to engage. What Scott alluded to is what we would call an ugly client. Somebody you really don't long-term want to work with. We all have them. Early on in a career, you take what? Everybody. You need to survive. You need to pay bills, all those kinds of things. Over time, what do? You become more targeted in who you go after, and you start firing people. And that's not in a harsh sense, but it's about alignment. It's about, are you bringing on clients that align with your approach and your mentality? And again, they're true to who you are. So to me, it's more about how you challenge people when you're in front of them and how they respond. Do they communicate well? Do they do some of the basic core things that are important to you? We can all scrub based on group size and geography and all those kinds of things. I'm more interested in how you engage with them face to face, who you choose to bring on, and who you jettison. It's a mutual interview. You're not there to beg for anybody's business, and you're not there just to tell them your story. You're there to ask a lot of questions, hear theirs, and see if it aligns with who you are.
So quick note before you go, Marshall, because I think what John said it was a breakthrough for our company, frankly. And John, just a quick note before I touch on that. You mentioned ugly clients. We're not one of your ugly clients, are we? No, we're not going to get fired soon. So here's full transparency. Bottom Line Solutions has engaged every one of these professionals for their relative areas of expertise, every single one of them on the stage. It's one of the reasons they're on the stage. So, but yeah, so I don't want to be an ugly client. So if we start getting that way, let me know. We want to stay in good graces. But the other note that I wanted to mention, just tagging on to John's point, was in terms of that ideal client profile, he talked about you can get the selects, but the thing he said that I hope you guys got, and I want to repeat it, mutual interview. It's not a prospect meeting. It is a prospect meeting, right? But what if you qualified it and labeled it? What if you told your prospect? So currently, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, we're setting up mutual interviews for companies in your industry of your size to determine if we have cost-saving solutions that might be valuable for your bottom line. I think it's worth your time and certainly worth ours to have that mutual interview to determine if there's an alignment and a fit where we could work together or not. The point is, when we give you a concept up here, like this great phrase, mutual interview, that is a mindset. And it's most important to have it as a mindset, but sometimes you could translate it into those conversations and actually refer to, let's get together for a meeting. No, let's get together. We currently have some open spots for mutual interviews this month. What's a mutual interview? Let me tell you. So I just wanted to touch on that. Marshall, your notes about ideal client profile.
Yeah, so the idea of an ideal client profile, I mean, we're talking about target audience, right? And John and Megan made a lot of strong points here. Yeah, demographics and business size and all these other factors are a big deal. Those things matter. But there's also a factor of what's going to be emotionally compelling to your target audience when you're developing a marketing message, when you're developing content, and when you actually show up for the sale itself. And how you find those emotional hooks is probably going to take a good bit of legwork and a good bit of research. There's a couple ways you can go about doing that. The first one, I'll be really brief on these. The first one is, what's your dream client look like? Just sit down on a piece of paper and just jot it out. The second one is go through your roster of clients and pick out your top 10, your top 2, your number 1, the kind of clients that when they call, you love to pick up the phone. You love working with them. You love the results you're getting. You love the dynamic that you have. Start taking that relationship apart. Figure out what sets this client apart from the other clients that you have. And frankly, talk to them about it because they probably have some insights they can share with you. And that might give you some interesting starting points for developing how you're going to find more people like those clients. Because a lot of this stuff, you're not going to find it on your fact sheet. You're going to have to really dig in and get a little creative about what's going to engage your exact ideal prospect.
Yeah, I think that's right on. And so, one of the best places to, where do you get that profile? Where do you get that scope, that list of criteria of people you want to work with most? It's from your existing book of business, certainly one place. Now, if you want to expand outside the people, maybe you don't like any of your clients. I hope that's not the case. But if it's true, you certainly want to expand outside that, and now you know what not to look for, right? So that's the other side of it. We can find what we want in our current book of business. We can also find absolutely what we don't want. Industries we don't want to work with. Is the industry that we're working with in a growth mode or not? We know we work really well in industries that are declining, so we want more of those. Okay. We know we much prefer working with companies that are growing, right? So look at those things within your own book of business. I think it's a great note. I want to go back to value proposition just for a moment and talk about the elements of a story or value proposition or compelling message or hook or key outcome or whatever terminology you want to use. And, John, in your universe, we're talking about someone making a phone call, having a very brief moment in time to engage a prospect and at least get some level of attention and interest. It's one of the hardest results to get on the planet. I think we all would agree. Effectively a cold call. I don't really call what PT Services does cold calling because it's way more sophisticated and advanced than that, frankly. But starting with you and then maybe working down the line, elements that go into, so when you're putting together a script, for instance, and you're saying, we have to have this level, this type of thing that we talk about. What does that look like? What are the components of that value prop or that outcome that go into that script?
Yeah, so we start with a core scripting, or we'll call it conversation guide. We try and give our callers a lot of latitude. The components that you're referring to are also ever evolving. So if you think back to when the ACA really started to take hold and we started talking Obamacare and all those kinds of things, what was the first thing that everybody discussed? Compliance. That was the mantra. And it wasn't long before that then started to fade, and then we started to talk about other things, like we would start to begin to talk about self-funding and other options. And then we would also get very niche-oriented with your target list and a very specific story you may tell. So when our callers engage, they tell a brief story about who you are. They usually tag 3 items that are prevalent to people in the space of the prospect they're talking to. They ask if any ring true, and then in our world, the call really begins because we expect a no or pushback, and for lack of a better phrase, if you will, it's now game on for our caller. Do it the right way, do it professionally, be persistent, but now it's really when it begins because up until then, we've done more of the talking. So we're looking for 3 specific items usually that stand out and resonate from the things they very commonly and quickly hear. And then it's a question of what are those 3 items that are true to who you are. I'll give one brief example. It's a little outside, so it's in the P&C space. We called into the Bronx for somebody. And if you have ever tried calling into the Bronx, it is an extremely interesting experience. We had very little expectation, but he specifically called on houses of worship. That was it. That was the list. Bronx and Queens. We worked a list of 600 for about 2 years because his message was so intensely targeted, and he had such great business intelligence about his competitors that we could tell a very compelling story based on the response we would get from the individual. So that kind of targeting, not all things to all people, is really what's important to us.
Yep. Two notes, just quick notes, and Megan. So John just said at the very end of his comment, intelligence. So he talked about competitive intelligence, but also prospect intelligence. The more knowledge you have about your prospect, your ideal prospect, and their specific situation, I'm talking about individual, right? You can look at it holistically. You know, you can have your target 100 list and say all 100 of these companies have this in common, sure. But if you can have individualistic intelligence on each of those companies, especially if they're on your target 100 list, they're your dream 100 clients or dream 100 prospects, it can be much, much more effective. So for those of you who aren't using the tool MyEdge is one of the ultimate intelligence tools for having an intelligent conversation in a marketing or sales sense. So just a quick note. Megan?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything John said. But I want to take it from a different perspective. So when you talk about sharing your story and your value proposition, sometimes today it doesn't resonate to sit and do your elevator pitch and say why you do what you do best. I think it's key to kind of pull out and extract those differentiators of your value proposition and start really nurturing, and nurturing is essentially a fancy way to say drip marketing. It's a softer way, but you nurture your prospects now. But for an example, if you're an enrollment expert as a firm and that's your expertise, what you want to do is start creating content and sharing stories about why you're an enrollment expert and some of the, how your clients can be better in the enrollment process, how they can educate their employees, kind of those outcomes that we touched upon.
Yeah, outcomes, process-oriented differentiators.
Right, exactly. The things that are meaningful to them and that they experience, rather than just saying you do it, talk about the how and the why, and create resources on how they can be better at enrollment, they can be better at benefits education, how they can get creative, how they can engage their employees. And that's the whole basis of content marketing, is telling and showing rather than saying.
Yeah, I think that's huge. So yes, always show rather than tell, right? I think that's huge. The other note that you talked about that I think is really, really important is the nature of the content itself. So what do we focus on when we write something, when we say something, when we speak, when we deliver something? What are we talking about? Differentiation, outcomes, sure. And you described it. You put it in the framework where the prospect is seeing themselves have that positive experience or those positive results. So when Nelson and I think about this internally in Bottom Line Solutions, we call that focusing on the destination as opposed to the transportation, which is a concept we learned from Craig Lack, one of our mastermind partners. And so the idea is we want to focus the prospect on where they're going to be, where we're going to help take them, where they can help take themselves. And we're going to paint this picture that's very legit, that's very real, that we've done with our other clients. And the more specific and compelling that ultimate destination picture is, the more compelled that prospect will be to ask what? If I paint you this beautiful picture of a beautiful destination, what's your next question going to ask me? How do I get there? Well, now we can have a meaningful conversation, right? If they ask how do I get there, the sale has already happened. It's done. They're already a client. Maybe not on a contract level, but they're already a client here. Now you just have to prove to them that you're actually capable of driving the bus or flying the plane or transporting them to their destination.
So one of the things that John hinted at that I want to pick up on is that value proposition, how you present it. It depends on when you're presenting it, right? So when PT's making a phone call to somebody that has never heard of you, the way they present that value proposition should be very different from how you present that value proposition when you've had a meeting and now they're in your drip marketing system and it's the third email that you've sent them. The story and the core of you and the core of the value proposition is not changing, but you don't need to start at the beginning of the story every time because you've already engaged the prospect and that relationship is hopefully evolving. So when you figure out what your story is and what that core messaging that you're sharing is, the next step is to look at how can you evolve and build on that messaging throughout the engagement cycle, throughout the sales funnel. Because that's when content gets really exciting, when you have someone that's 3 months in, you've had a lot of conversations with them, and now you can start having very specific and very targeted conversations that are relevant to where they are in your relationship. A lot of content marketing, it's very easy for it to be this really general scattershot approach, but we keep talking about narrow it down, make it specific, and when is a big deal when you're making content specific.
That's good. So last question I want to ask the group. I want to open up for 3, 4, 5 minutes for questions. We'll be able to get a few in. I need someone to lead the catch box for me here. Silverman? That's not bad. Left-handed and everything. All right, last question for the three of you. So I'm going to ask you one of those questions that we get asked as marketing people all the time. That is a totally unfair question, but it's a great question. And so you all tell me if this is a good question or not. It is a good question. What's the one? Yeah. Talk about, all right. My
Always
point.
answer your own questions?
I do. I always answer my questions. Do I? Yes, I do. Now we have 2 minutes. What's the one marketing strategy that you would recommend to help employee benefit advisors grow their business? The reason the question is unfair is because it implies that you all are the same and that you deliver the same outcomes, and that's not fair. It also implies that you have the same prospects. However, we're going to ask it of these three people. We're going to be totally unfair to our panelists and ask the question anyway, and just give your best answer to that. It can be a marketing strategy or tool. Obviously, the more specific, the better.
Okay.
I know it's unfair, guys. I apologize.
I will bite first. I think universally, one of the things that's applied to pretty much all the businesses we worked with, and advisors and brokers included, is your nurturing and retention strategy. You should probably, almost 99% across the board, this is the case, you should be having some sort of automated email system that creates a touch point with your clients and with your prospects, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, something consistent that shows up, brings value to them, is useful, maybe it's entertaining. That's a really straightforward way to make all of your marketing more efficient, more profitable, because the prospects in the pipeline, you've already paid to get them there, so you might as well keep talking to them. And the clients you have, you want to keep them so they keep giving you business, and also so they refer you business. That's probably the core place I would recommend everybody start. If I had to pick just one thing, I guess I kind of picked 1.5 there.
I'll give you
a tough
1.5.
question, so I'm going to cheat.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. All right, Megan?
Yes. I would say if you're going to do anything, definitely be consistent, but think about your staple. So think about your infrastructure today and what you think you can accomplish consistently, and build around that. So if you're going to say, we can really be experts at social selling, or really having a brand presence, through social, then we're going to dedicate our strategy around that, and we're going to be consistent, and we're going to have posts and content, and if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you're connecting then with your prospects and growing your network, because the worst thing you can do is continue to push out information and content to the same people, and it's going on deaf ears, or it's a big spiral.
So to your point, Megan, what I think another way to say what you're saying is, if you're going to do marketing, and you should, it needs to be strategic, and you have to make a true strategic commitment to it. If you don't do anything else, have a strategic commitment to your marketing.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, especially if they don't really have a strategy, they want to go in and do everything,
right,
and they get really excited, and that's great. But the key to evolving in a marketing strategy is really to look at what you guys can handle now, and at least do something and do it consistent, and be really good at that first.
Right.
Because then everything else can complement that staple.
Don't worry about
center.
doing everything at once.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome. John?
So I'm going to be a little vague at the moment, but I'll close with a specific item. 1, do something you're not doing now. And 2, do something that makes you incredibly uncomfortable. Because if you keep doing what you've always done, we know, get what you got. But the adage of you don't truly grow as a firm or as an individual unless you get uncomfortable. Too many of us want to stay in a safe, comfortable spot because of the discomfort that growth causes. If you really want to grow exponentially, start doing things that make you incredibly uncomfortable. So that can mean you sit in an office and you pick up the phone yourself. That can mean you do various things relative to running the appointments that a firm like ours sets. But I will tell you, the biggest thing we find, the first 60 to 90 days working with us, people are generally uncomfortable. You're meeting colder appointments than maybe you'd like, and it needs to have a different tone. So we started working, if you haven't read the book, it's a terrific book. It's called, I always want to say client, it's called Customer Success. And it was built around the Salesforce platform. And they talked about churn rate for Salesforce. It was 8% per month. So they're almost losing their entire book of business annually. So it talks about the things they started to do differently, but how uncomfortable that was. So for the first 60 to 90 days in working with us, we actually have you engaged now with a sales coach and start to get through a lot of that discomfort. So do things that are uncomfortable and that you're not doing now if you truly want to grow.
Outstanding. Good. Let's take time for 3 quick questions. And when we get a question, you can direct it to the whole panel. You can direct it to one of us. Maybe let's let 1 or 2 of us answer and then move on. So yes, there's a question back here. So if we can get the catch box.
Can I start the questions?
Yes, since you're holding the catch box, 1, 2, and then our third question is over there. Okay, yes, go ahead, Eric.
I have my opinion on this, but I'm curious your guys. With respect to content, should advisors, when they're posting on social media and trying to build an audience and a brand, should they focus on a home run content every single time, or should they just put out mass content and know that some will be strikeouts, some will be home runs, and there'll be much stuff in the middle?
Quality always trumps quantity. I would rather you post on LinkedIn once every 2 weeks if those are really good, interesting posts, rather than posting 3 times a week or every day. Same thing with blog content. You can hire a blog firm that's going to give you 5 blog posts a day. I mean, 5 blog posts, you can't get 5 blog posts a day, but 5 blog posts a week. Those are really easy to find, hit that volume. Nobody's going to read it. You're much better off taking the time to develop something that your audience really cares about. And it's okay if it's not on a really quick cadence, but as long as you're kind of staying consistent with your pacing, you're going to have far better results.
Awesome. All right, let's get the catch box back here to Rachel. Yeah, come up here. Oh, that's awesome. This is so fun.
That's what the catch box is
That's
for.
what it's for.
Everybody, that's okay, everyone.
All right, like, come on down.
All right.
This could be to any of you guys. Sorry, it was kind of awkward. I was standing behind him. So my question is, we use Hatchbuck for inbound marketing. So in trying to do targeted messaging, there are a couple different niche markets that we focus on. So how much time and energy should we be spending in making it targeted to different markets? I know that we try and do different content to CFOs than we would to like a VP of HR. But how targeted should we make it towards those niche markets? And how much time should we be spending on it?
Yeah.
We do it monthly.
Yeah, I would say you should spend a majority of your time focusing on the segmentation and targeted messaging, because it's not difficult if you start from the top and you kind of have an umbrella of the message and what you want to say, and then tweaking it and positioning it for those markets. So I think when you're able to scale it and really get where it's turnkey, it'll be more efficient. But I would say that you guys are on the right track, and I would continue to invest in that because the open rates that you get, the click-throughs, the engagement is so much better than sending a blanketed email that there's no reason not to, and it's definitely a good investment.
Excellent. All right, last question. I think it's over here, front row. Thank you, Trey.
All the digital media specialists that I've talked to, they all start their value proposition with the premise that some high percentage, 80, 90% of consumers start their search online. And so I started thinking, is that really true? Do you guys believe that's true in the benefit consulting business? I mean, are CFOs and HR people really going online and searching for people?
at the risk of polarizing my panel, absolutely not. All right, go ahead, guys.
I agree. There's some businesses, particularly like retail B2C, where search is incredibly important. In your space, I'm sure that the businesses you're targeting, they already got a guy or they already got a woman that's doing their work for them, and you're trying to go in and unseat them. And I think that that's going to kind of require an entirely different marketing approach. I think John would probably be able to pick that one up.
Yeah, I think to your point, if you think about the last car you bought, you probably did a lot of research. You went in knowing what you would pay in a range, all those kinds of things. From the people we talk to all day, not a chance. Yeah, doesn't happen.
So a corollary to that question as we wrap, a couple of quick announcements too before we finish. But what was your name? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Steve. Thank you, Steve. Great question. Fantastic question. Question I think we all get a lot. Let me ask the audience. When is a prospect going to potentially be looking for a solution that you might be able to bring them? Thursday. I always count on Eric Silverman. So the somewhat of a rhetorical question. Do you mind if I ask you a rhetorical question before you answer? They're going to be looking for you, not online. They're looking for you when the renewal comes in or when they realize the status quo is not sufficient for them. Now, a lot of them are looking for you. They don't know that you exist. They want to break the status quo. They want to destroy it. They don't want to play the renewal, roulette every year. They would much rather work with someone like you. They just don't know you exist, which is why these three people are on stage to help you let your marketplaces and your best prospects know that you exist and that you have solutions and that you can create outcomes and results that they didn't even know were possible. So it's a fantastic question. Thanks for letting me segue into that, Steve. I'll pay you later. All right. As we wrap, we're getting ready to bring up a phenomenal interview, so no one go anywhere. Before we do that, quick note, this book is called The Innovative Brand. It was written by the gentleman immediately to my right, Marshall Carper. When you come back from lunch in a little while, these will be at your spots. So courtesy of Marshall Carper, everyone is getting a copy of his book, The Innovative Brand. It is an outstanding, outstanding read. And the book does a phenomenal job not only teaching great content, but delivering content so that Marshall gets your attention, your interest, your desire, and potentially your action as well. So a big round of applause for all of our panelists. You guys did a great job.